Stress has become one of the most common experiences of modern life. People wake up already feeling pressure. There are responsibilities waiting, expectations to meet, problems that demand attention, and a constant stream of noise that never seems to stop. Phones buzz with notifications. News cycles bring more uncertainty. The future can feel unclear, and the weight of it all presses quietly on the heart. Many people live as if they are constantly running. Running to keep up. Running to fix things. Running to survive another day of pressure. And yet, despite all the effort, the feeling of stress often remains. But when you look at the life of Jesus, something remarkable becomes clear. Jesus lived in a world that was far from peaceful. In fact, the pressures around him were enormous. Crowds followed him everywhere he went. Thousands of people wanted his attention. Some wanted healing. Others demanded answers. Many were simply curious. At the same time, powerful religious leaders were constantly trying to trap him with questions. They criticized him, watched his every move, and plotted against him. Even his own disciples often misunderstood him. And above all of this, Jesus carried the full knowledge that a painful crucifixion awaited him. If anyone had reason to feel overwhelmed, it would have been him. Yet when you read the stories of his life, one detail stands out again and again. Jesus was never frantic. He was never rushing in panic. He was never emotionally overwhelmed by the chaos around him. He was never controlled by pressure. Instead, there was something incredibly calm about him. A quiet strength. A steady presence. A deep peace that seemed untouched by the storms around him. When a violent storm threatened to sink the boat his disciples were in, the disciples panicked. They believed they were about to die. But where was Jesus? He was asleep. Not because he didn't care, but because his heart rested in a kind of peace that most people never experience. And this raises an important question. How? How could Jesus remain so calm under pressure? How could he face constant criticism, overwhelming crowds, and the knowledge of suffering ahead without collapsing under stress? The answer is not what most people expect. Many people imagine that Jesus handled stress differently simply because he was divine. But when we look closely at his life, we see something more practical, something deeply human, something that can still be learned today. Jesus followed a way of living that protected his heart from being consumed by pressure. It was not a single moment. It was not a single prayer. It was a pattern, a way of responding to the world. And surprisingly, it is a way that many people overlook when they read the stories of the Gospels. Most people notice the miracles. They remember the healings. They remember the sermons. They remember the dramatic moments. But they often miss the quiet habits that shaped how Jesus lived every single day. These habits were not loud. They were not dramatic. But they were powerful. They gave Jesus a stability that could not be shaken by circumstances. And if we pay attention to those moments, we begin to see a completely different way of dealing with stress. Not a way based on control. Not a way based on rushing faster. Not a way based on forcing solutions. But a way built on something deeper. A way built on stillness, trust, prayer, and clarity about what truly matters. In a world that constantly tells us to hurry, Jesus moved differently. When people pushed him to act faster, he remained patient. When crowds demanded his attention, he sometimes stepped away. When pressure increased, he did not collapse inward. Instead, he turned toward the Father. Again and again, the Gospels show us that the way Jesus handled stress was not by fighting the noise of the world. It was by refusing to let that noise control his heart. And this changes everything. Because the truth is, many people today are not overwhelmed simply because life is difficult. They are overwhelmed because they are trying to carry everything on their own. They are trying to control every outcome. They are trying to meet every expectation. They are trying to fix every problem. And eventually, the weight becomes too heavy. But Jesus shows us another way. A better way. A way that brings peace even when life remains uncertain. A way that allows the soul to breathe again. And the most surprising part is this. The way Jesus handled stress is not something distant or impossible. It is something we can begin learning today. By looking carefully at the moments when pressure surrounded him. By noticing how he responded. By understanding the quiet decisions he made again and again. We begin to see a pattern that can transform how we face our own struggles. In the next few moments, we will explore several powerful ways Jesus handled stress. Ways that most people overlook when they read the Bible. These are not complicated ideas, but they are deeply life-changing. And once you begin to see them, You may never look at the life of Jesus the same way again, because the world around you may remain chaotic, but your heart does not have to. And the way Jesus lived shows us exactly how. Jesus never let urgency control him. One of the most overlooked reasons Jesus remained calm under pressure is this. He was never controlled by urgency. And that might sound simple at first, but it goes directly against how most people live today. Because in our world, urgency feels like everything. We are constantly told that we must act fast, respond quickly, fix things immediately, make decisions without delay. If something goes wrong, we rush to solve it. If someone needs us, we feel pressure to respond instantly. If an opportunity appears, we are afraid to miss it. And slowly, without realizing it, urgency begins to control our lives. It shapes our decisions. It fuels our anxiety. It keeps our minds restless. But when you look at the life of Jesus, you see something completely different. There were many moments when people expected him to act quickly. Moments when urgency filled the air. Moments when everyone around him felt that something had to be done immediately. And yet, Jesus refused to be rushed. One of the clearest examples of this is found in the story of Lazarus. Lazarus was someone Jesus loved deeply. When Lazarus became seriously ill, his sisters sent a message to Jesus, asking him to come. To them, this was urgent. Time mattered. Every moment counted. They believed that if Jesus arrived quickly, Lazarus could be healed. But when Jesus received the message, something unexpected happened. He did not rush. He did not immediately leave. He did not respond with panic. Instead, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. From a human perspective, this made no sense. If you love someone, you go immediately. If someone is dying, you don't delay. If you have the power to help, you act now. But Jesus operated differently. He was not driven by urgency. He was guided by purpose. And this is where we begin to see a powerful truth. Urgency is not always the same as importance. Just because something feels urgent does not mean it is aligned with what truly matters. Jesus understood timing in a way that most people do not. He was not reacting to pressure. He was responding to the will of the Father. And because of that, he could remain calm even when others were anxious. When Jesus finally arrived, Lazarus had already died. To everyone else, it looked like it was too late. The opportunity had passed. The situation was beyond repair. And if we are honest, this is exactly how many people feel in their own lives. They feel like they are always too late. Too late to fix things. Too late to change. Too late to make things right. But Jesus showed something deeper. He was never late. He was always on time, according to a greater purpose. And what followed in that story was not just a healing. It was a resurrection, something far greater than what anyone had expected. And this reveals something important about stress. Much of our stress comes from the belief that everything depends on us acting immediately. We feel like if we don't respond fast enough, everything will fall apart. We feel like if we don't control the situation, it will be lost. So we rush. We overthink. We carry pressure that was never meant for us. But Jesus shows another way. He shows us that peace begins when we stop letting urgency control us. This does not mean ignoring responsibility. It does not mean becoming passive. It means learning the difference between reacting in panic and responding with purpose. Jesus was never passive. He was intentional. Every step he took had meaning. Every decision he made was aligned with something greater than the pressure of the moment. And because of that, he was not shaken by urgency. He could move slowly when others were rushing. He could wait when others were panicking. He could stay calm when others were overwhelmed. And this is incredibly relevant today, because many people are not just tired. They are mentally exhausted. Not because they have too much to do, but because they feel like everything must be done right now. There is no space to breathe, no space to think, no space to rest. Just constant movement, constant pressure, constant urgency. But what if the problem is not your schedule? What if the problem is the way urgency has taken control of your heart? What if peace is not found in doing more, but in learning to slow down? Jesus lived with a different rhythm. A rhythm that was not dictated by the noise around him. A rhythm that was grounded in trust. He trusted that he did not need to rush to make things happen. He trusted that the Father was in control. And because of that, he could let go of the pressure to force outcomes. This is something many people struggle with. We want to fix everything. We want to control outcomes. We want to make sure things go the way we expect. And when things feel uncertain, urgency increases. But Jesus shows us that real peace comes from releasing that control, from trusting that not everything depends on us, from understanding that timing is not always in our hands. And when we begin to live this way, something changes inside us. The constant pressure begins to fade. The need to rush begins to loosen its grip. The anxiety that comes from urgency begins to quiet down. And in its place, something else begins to grow. Clarity, patience, peace. Because when urgency no longer controls you, you are finally free to live with intention, free to make decisions with wisdom, free to move through life without being driven by fear. And this is the first lesson we learn from Jesus. He did not allow urgency to control his actions. He moved with purpose. He trusted the timing of God. And because of that, he lived with a peace that pressure could not destroy. Jesus stepped away from noise. If there is one thing that defines modern life, it is this: noise. Not just physical noise, but mental noise. Constant input, constant information, constant voices competing for attention. People are surrounded by opinions, expectations, demands, and distractions almost every moment of the day. And without realizing it, this noise becomes one of the biggest sources of stress. Because the human soul was never designed to carry that much input. It was never meant to process endless voices, endless pressure, endless demands without rest. And yet, many people try to live that way. They wake up and immediately check their phones. They move from one responsibility to another. They fill every quiet moment with something: music, social media, conversations, notifications. There is almost no silence left. And slowly, the mind becomes overwhelmed. The heart becomes restless. And stress begins to grow, not always because life is hard, but because there is no space to breathe. Now, when we look at the life of Jesus, something very different appears. Jesus was constantly surrounded by people. Crowds followed him everywhere. People came with needs, questions, desperation, hope. They wanted healing. They wanted answers. They wanted his time. If anyone lived in constant noise, it was Jesus. And yet, he never allowed that noise to consume him. Instead, he did something that most people overlook. He stepped away. Again and again, the Gospels show us that Jesus would leave the crowds. Not because he didn't care, not because he was avoiding people, but because he understood something deeply important. You cannot pour into others if your soul is empty. There were moments when the crowds were still searching for him, and he had already gone. He went to quiet places, mountains, deserted areas, places where there were no voices, no expectations, no distractions, places where it was just him and the Father. And in those moments, something powerful happened. He regained clarity. He found rest. He reconnected with the source of his strength. This was not occasional. It was a pattern, a rhythm. Jesus did not wait until he was completely exhausted to step away. He built solitude into his life. And this is something many people miss. Most people treat rest as a reaction. They only stop when they are already overwhelmed. They only step away when they are already burned out. But Jesus treated solitude as a priority. He stepped away before the pressure became too much, before the noise took over, before the stress reached its peak. And this is a completely different way of living. Because in today's world, stepping away often feels wrong. People feel guilty for resting. They feel like they are wasting time. They feel like they should always be doing something. But Jesus never lived with that mindset. He understood that stepping away was not weakness. It was wisdom. Because without silence, there is no clarity. Without stillness, there is no peace. Without space, the soul becomes crowded. And a crowded soul cannot hear God clearly. This is why so many people feel lost. Not because God is distant, but because their lives are too noisy to hear him. Their minds are filled with too many voices. Their hearts are pulled in too many directions. And in the middle of all that noise, stress grows stronger. But Jesus shows us a different path. He shows us that sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is step away. Step away from the noise. Step away from the pressure. Step away from the endless demands. Not forever, but long enough to reconnect with what truly matters. This is where real peace begins. Not in doing more, not in trying harder, but in creating space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to pray, space to simply be still. And this is something that can be practiced today. It does not require a mountain or a desert. It starts with small decisions, turning off distractions, creating moments of silence, choosing not to fill every second with noise. And at first, this can feel uncomfortable, because many people are not used to silence. Silence feels unfamiliar. It feels empty. But over time, something begins to change. That silence becomes peaceful. That stillness becomes restoring. That space becomes sacred, because it is in those quiet moments that the soul begins to settle. The mind begins to slow down, and the presence of God becomes clearer. Jesus understood this deeply. He knew that his strength did not come from constant activity. It came from connection with the Father. And that connection required time away from everything else. This is why, even when people needed him, he still stepped away. Even when there was more to do, he still made space. Because he knew that without that time, everything else would suffer. And this is a lesson many people need today. Because the world will always demand more. There will always be more messages, more expectations, more responsibilities. The noise will never stop on its own, which means if you don't choose to step away, it will never happen. And the result is a life that feels constantly full, but deeply empty. Busy, but without peace. Connected, but disconnected from what truly matters. But Jesus shows us another way. A quieter way. A healthier way. A way that protects the heart from being overwhelmed. He shows us that stepping away is not losing control. It is regaining it. Not by controlling everything around you, but by creating space within you. And when you begin to live this way, stress begins to lose its power. Because stress thrives in noise. But peace grows in stillness. And the more you learn to step away, the more you begin to experience the kind of calm that Jesus lived with every day. Jesus turned stress into prayer. Most people don't know what to do with stress. When pressure rises, the natural reaction is to hold it inside, to think about it over and over, to try to solve it mentally. The mind begins to race. Thoughts become heavier. Emotions start to build. And instead of finding peace, the stress multiplies. Because carrying pressure internally without release will always lead to exhaustion. Some people try to distract themselves. They scroll. They watch something. They keep themselves busy. Others try to control everything around them. They overplan. They overthink. They try to eliminate uncertainty. But even then, the stress remains. Because it has nowhere to go. Now when we look at the life of Jesus, we see something radically different. Jesus never carried stress alone. He always turned it into prayer. And this is one of the most powerful patterns in his life. Whenever pressure increased, whenever something heavy approached, whenever the weight of the moment became real, Jesus did not suppress it. He brought it to the Father, not as a ritual, not as a performance, but as something deeply real. One of the most revealing moments of this is found in the Garden of Gethsemane. This was the night before the crucifixion. Jesus knew what was coming. He knew the suffering. He knew the pain. He knew the weight of what he was about to carry. And for the first time, we see the full intensity of his emotional burden. He was not calm in the way people might expect. He was deeply troubled. He said his soul was overwhelmed with sorrow. This is important, because it shows us that feeling stress is not a sign of weakness. Even Jesus felt the weight of what he was facing. But what he did next is what changes everything. He prayed, not casually, not briefly, but intensely, honestly, fully. He did not hide his emotions. He expressed them. He did not pretend everything was fine. He brought the reality of his struggle before the Father. Let this cup pass from me. This was not a weak moment. It was a real moment, a human moment. And yet, even in that honesty, something deeper was present. Yet not my will, but yours be done. This is where stress began to transform. Because prayer, in the life of Jesus, was not just about asking for change. It was about surrender. It was about releasing control. It was about trusting God, even when the situation did not change immediately. And this is something many people misunderstand. They think prayer is only effective if it removes the problem. But in the life of Jesus, prayer often did something more powerful. It changed the heart. It brought alignment. It replaced fear with trust. After praying, Jesus stood up with a different strength. The situation had not changed. The cross was still ahead. The suffering was still coming. But inside, something had shifted. He was no longer overwhelmed. He was ready. And this reveals a powerful truth. Prayer does not always remove stress, but it transforms how you carry it. Instead of holding everything inside, instead of trying to manage it alone, prayer gives your stress somewhere to go. It becomes a release, a conversation, a surrender. And through that process, the weight begins to lift. Not always because the problem disappears, but because you are no longer carrying it by yourself. Jesus lived this way consistently. Before major decisions, he prayed. In moments of pressure, he prayed. When emotions were heavy, he prayed. Prayer was not something he turned to occasionally. It was his first response. And this is where many people struggle today. Prayer is often treated as a last resort, something to try when everything else fails. After the stress has already taken over, after the mind is already exhausted, after the heart is already overwhelmed. But Jesus shows a different order. Prayer first, not last. Before reacting, before deciding, before trying to fix everything, he turned toward the Father. And because of that, stress never had the chance to take full control. This is a shift that can change everything. Imagine facing pressure, and instead of overthinking, you pause and pray. Imagine feeling overwhelmed, and instead of carrying it alone, you release it. Imagine dealing with uncertainty, and instead of trying to force answers, you trust. This is the way Jesus lived, and it created a kind of peace that could not be shaken by circumstances. Because prayer is not just about words. It is about connection. It is about remembering that you are not alone, that there is someone greater than your situation, someone who sees what you cannot see, someone who holds what you cannot control. And when that becomes real to you, stress begins to lose its grip. The constant pressure to figure everything out begins to fade. The need to control every outcome begins to soften. And in its place, something else begins to grow. A quiet confidence, a deeper peace, a steady trust that holds even when life feels uncertain. This does not happen instantly. It is a process, a habit, a way of living. But the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. And the more natural it becomes, the less power stress has over you, because you are no longer carrying it alone. And this is the third lesson we learn from Jesus. He did not let stress build up inside him. He turned it into prayer. He released it. He surrendered it. And in doing so, he walked through even the hardest moments with a strength that came from something far deeper than circumstances. Jesus focused only on what truly matters. One of the biggest hidden causes of stress in modern life is this: trying to carry things that don't actually matter, not because they are completely meaningless, but because they are not essential. Opinions, criticism, expectations from others, social pressure, the need to prove something. These things may feel important in the moment, but they slowly drain energy, focus, and peace. And over time, they create a kind of stress that never seems to go away. Because no matter how much you do, there is always more to respond to, more to defend, more to explain, more to worry about. Now, when we look at the life of Jesus, we see something very clear. He was constantly surrounded by opinions. People judged him, questioned him, misunderstood him. Religious leaders criticized everything he did. They accused him of breaking traditions. They challenged his authority. They tried to trap him with difficult questions. If Jesus had chosen to respond to every accusation, he would have spent his entire life in conflict, constantly defending himself, constantly reacting, constantly pulled into arguments. But he didn't. And that is what makes his life so powerful. Jesus was extremely selective with his attention. He did not respond to everything. He did not engage every argument. He did not feel the need to prove himself to everyone. And this is something many people struggle with today. Because in a world where everything is visible, everything feels like it needs a response. Someone says something. You feel the need to reply. Someone misunderstands you. You feel the need to explain. Someone criticizes you. You feel the need to defend yourself. And slowly, your energy is consumed by things that do not actually move your life forward. Jesus never lived that way. He understood something that most people overlook. Not every voice deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every situation deserves your response. This does not mean he ignored people. It means he had clarity. Clarity about what truly mattered. Clarity about his mission. Clarity about what he was called to do. And because of that clarity, he could let go of everything else. There were times when people tried to provoke him, and he remained silent. There were moments when accusations were made, and he chose not to respond. There were situations where others expected a reaction, and he gave none. From the outside, this might look like weakness, but in reality, it was strength. Because it takes strength to stay focused. It takes strength to ignore distractions. It takes strength to not be pulled into every emotional reaction. And this is where many people lose their peace. Not because life is too hard, but because they are trying to carry too much. Too many opinions. Too many expectations. Too many unnecessary battles. And the result is constant mental exhaustion. But Jesus shows us another way. A simpler way. A more focused way. He centered his life around what truly mattered. The will of the Father. Helping people. Speaking truth. Everything else became secondary. And because of that, his mind was not crowded. His heart was not divided. His energy was not scattered. He lived with clarity. And clarity creates peace. Because when you know what truly matters, you stop wasting energy on what doesn't. You stop chasing approval. You stop reacting to every voice. You stop trying to meet expectations that were never meant for you. Instead, your focus becomes clear. Your decisions become easier. Your mind becomes quieter. And stress begins to decrease. Because you are no longer pulled in every direction. This is something that can change everything. Imagine how much lighter life would feel if you stopped trying to respond to everything. If you stopped carrying every opinion. If you stopped needing to prove yourself. If you focused only on what truly matters. This is how Jesus lived. And this is why he remained steady even in chaos. Because his attention was not scattered. It was anchored. And when your attention is anchored, your emotions become more stable. Your thoughts become clearer. Your heart becomes calmer. This does not mean life becomes easy. There will still be challenges, still be pressure, still be moments of difficulty. But those moments will no longer control you. Because you are not giving your energy to everything around you. You are choosing where your focus goes. And that choice changes everything. Because focus shapes experience. What you focus on grows. If you focus on every problem, stress grows. If you focus on every opinion, anxiety grows. If you focus on every expectation, pressure grows. But if you focus on what truly matters, peace begins to grow. Jesus understood this deeply. He knew that his time was limited. His energy was valuable. His mission was clear. And because of that, he refused to waste himself on things that did not align with that mission. This is not something people are taught today. The world often encourages the opposite. To be involved in everything. To respond to everything. To care about everything. But that kind of life leads to burnout. Because the human heart cannot carry that much. And Jesus shows us a better way. A way of clarity. A way of focus. A way of living that protects your peace. He teaches us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to let go. Let go of unnecessary pressure. Let go of opinions that don't matter. Let go of the need to respond to everything. And when you do that, something begins to shift inside you. Your mind becomes quieter. Your heart becomes lighter. Your life becomes simpler. And stress begins to lose its grip. Because you are no longer carrying what was never meant for you. And this is the fourth lesson we learn from Jesus. He focused only on what truly mattered. He let go of everything else. And because of that, he lived with a clarity and peace that no amount of pressure could take away. Jesus trusted God instead of forcing outcomes. One of the deepest roots of stress in human life is this: the need to control outcomes. People don't just want things to happen. They want things to happen a certain way, at a certain time, with a certain result, according to a certain expectation. And when life doesn't follow that plan, stress begins to rise. Because control feels like safety. If you can control the outcome, you feel secure. If you can predict what will happen, you feel at peace. But the reality is this: most of life is not controllable. And the more you try to force it, the more frustrated you become. Now, when we look at the life of Jesus, we see something completely different. Jesus never tried to force outcomes. He trusted God completely. And that trust is one of the main reasons he was able to remain calm even in the most uncertain situations. There were many moments where Jesus could have taken control. Moments where he could have changed the situation instantly. Moments where he had the power to shape the outcome exactly the way he wanted. But he didn't use that power to avoid difficulty. He didn't manipulate situations to create comfort. Instead, he surrendered to the will of the Father. And this is something that goes against human instinct. Because surrender feels like losing control. It feels like letting go of certainty. It feels like stepping into the unknown. But in the life of Jesus, surrender was not weakness. It was strength. Because his trust was not in circumstances. It was in God. One of the clearest examples of this is the moment of his arrest. Jesus knew it was coming. He knew the betrayal. He knew the suffering. He knew what was ahead. And yet, he did not run. He did not resist. He did not try to escape the situation. In fact, when one of his followers tried to fight back and defend him, Jesus stopped him. He chose not to take control of the outcome. He chose to trust. This is incredibly difficult for most people to understand. Because when something goes wrong, the natural reaction is to fix it immediately, to take control, to change the direction, to avoid pain. But Jesus shows us something deeper. Not every difficult situation is meant to be avoided. Some are meant to be walked through. And that requires trust. Trust that even when things don't make sense, there is a greater purpose unfolding. Trust that even when the outcome looks uncertain, it is not out of God's control. Trust that even when the path is difficult, it is still leading somewhere meaningful. This kind of trust changes everything. Because when you stop trying to force outcomes, you release a huge amount of pressure. The pressure to make everything work perfectly. The pressure to control every detail. The pressure to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Instead, you begin to live with a different mindset. You still take action. You still make decisions. But you are no longer driven by fear. You are no longer trying to control what cannot be controlled. And that creates peace. Because stress often comes from the gap between expectation and reality. You expect things to go a certain way, but reality is different. And that gap creates frustration. But when you trust God with the outcome, that gap begins to close. Because your peace is no longer dependent on things going your way. It is rooted in something deeper, in something unchanging, in something that is not affected by circumstances. Jesus lived with that kind of trust. And because of that, he could face uncertainty without fear. He could walk into difficulty without panic. He could move forward even when the path was unclear. And this is something many people are searching for. They want peace, but they are trying to find it through control, through certainty, through making sure everything goes according to plan. But that kind of peace is fragile, because the moment something changes, the peace disappears. But the peace that comes from trust is different. It remains even when life is unpredictable, even when things don't go as expected, even when outcomes are uncertain, because it is not based on circumstances. It is based on faith. This does not mean life becomes easy. There will still be challenges, still be moments of doubt, still be situations that feel overwhelming. But those moments will not break you, because you are not relying on your ability to control everything. You are relying on something greater, and that changes how you experience stress. Instead of tightening your grip, you begin to let go. Instead of trying to force solutions, you begin to trust the process. Instead of fearing the unknown, you begin to walk through it with confidence. This is how Jesus lived. And this is why stress did not control him. Because he was not trying to control everything. He was trusting completely. And this is the fifth lesson we learn from Jesus. He did not force outcomes. He trusted God. And in that trust, he found a peace that remained steady no matter what was happening around him. Jesus lived in the present, not in fear of what's next. One of the most exhausting habits people carry today is this: living too far ahead, thinking about tomorrow, worrying about next week, imagining problems that haven't even happened yet. The mind keeps moving forward, trying to predict, prepare, and protect. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if things don't work out? And before anything even happens, stress is already there. Because the human mind is powerful, it can create scenarios that feel real, even when they are not. It can turn possibilities into fears. It can turn uncertainty into anxiety. And the more you think about the future in this way, the heavier life begins to feel. But when we look at the life of Jesus, we see something very different. Jesus was never controlled by the future. He lived fully in the present. This does not mean he ignored what was coming. He knew the future clearly. He knew the challenges ahead. He knew the suffering he would face. He knew the cross was waiting. And yet, he did not live in fear of it. He did not allow tomorrow to steal today's peace. Instead, he stayed grounded in the moment, fully present, fully aware, fully engaged with what was in front of him. When he was with people, he was truly with them, listening, teaching, healing. He was not distracted by what might happen next. He was not consumed by future outcomes. He gave his full attention to the present moment. And this is something that is very rare today, because many people are physically present, but mentally somewhere else, thinking about problems, replaying past mistakes, worrying about future situations. And as a result, they miss the moment they are in. They miss the peace that is available right now. They miss the clarity that comes from being present. Jesus understood something deeply important. Peace is found in the present, not in the future, not in imagined scenarios, but in this moment. This is why he taught something so simple, yet so powerful. Do not worry about tomorrow. Not because tomorrow doesn't matter, but because worrying about it changes nothing. It only steals peace from today. And this is where many people lose their strength. They are not just carrying today's challenges. They are carrying tomorrow's fears as well. And that weight becomes too much. But Jesus shows us a different way to live. A lighter way. A freer way. He teaches us to focus on what is in front of us. To handle today, to trust tomorrow, to God. This does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means releasing unnecessary fear. It means not allowing your mind to live in a future that does not exist yet. Because most of the things people worry about never actually happen, and yet they suffer as if they will. This is the trap of future-focused stress. It creates pain without reality. It creates fear without certainty. And it drains energy that could be used for what truly matters now. Jesus never lived in that space. He was aware of the future, but not controlled by it. He prepared when necessary, but did not worry. He trusted instead of feared, and that trust allowed him to remain steady. Even when the future was difficult, even when the path ahead was painful, he stayed grounded, present, focused. This is a powerful shift, because when you learn to live in the present, stress begins to lose its grip. Your mind slows down. Your thoughts become clearer. Your heart becomes calmer, because you are no longer trying to carry everything at once. You are only carrying what is in front of you, and that is something you can handle. This is how peace begins to grow, not by eliminating all problems, but by changing how you relate to time. Instead of living in the future, you return to now. Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, you focus on what is real. Instead of trying to control tomorrow, you trust. And in that trust, something changes. You begin to experience life differently. Moments become more meaningful. Conversations become deeper. Your awareness increases. Your stress decreases. Because you are no longer divided between what is and what might be. You are fully here, fully present. This is how Jesus lived. And this is why he could remain calm even when everything around him was uncertain. Because his peace was not tied to the future. It was rooted in the present. In his relationship with the Father, in his trust, in his focus. And this is the sixth lesson we learn from Jesus. He did not live in fear of what was next. He lived fully in the present. And in doing so, he experienced a kind of peace that the future could not take away. The peace you're looking for was never about removing stress. By now, something should feel different. Not necessarily around you, but inside you. Because when you look at the life of Jesus, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. He did not live a stress-free life. He lived a peace-filled life in the middle of stress. And that changes everything. Because most people are chasing the wrong goal. They think peace comes when problems disappear, when life becomes easier, when everything finally works out. But if that were true, then Jesus would have been overwhelmed constantly. Instead, he walked through pressure, calmly, through chaos, steadily, through uncertainty, without fear controlling him. Not because his circumstances were easy, but because his way of living was different. And that's the shift. The peace you're looking for is not found in changing everything around you. It's found in changing how you carry what's around you. Think about everything you've just seen. Jesus did not rush through life. He slowed down and stayed grounded. He did not carry everything alone. He stepped away to reconnect with God. He did not react emotionally to every situation. He remained centered and intentional. He did not give his energy to everything. He focused only on what truly mattered. He did not try to control outcomes. He trusted completely. He did not live in fear of tomorrow. He stayed present in today. This is not just spiritual teaching. This is a completely different way of living. And when you start to live this way, something begins to change. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually, deeply real. You start to feel less overwhelmed, less reactive, less anxious about things you cannot control, because you are no longer trying to carry life the way you used to. You are carrying it differently. And that difference is everything. Because stress is not just about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to what happens. Two people can face the same situation and experience it completely differently. One is overwhelmed. The other is steady. The difference is not the situation. It's the internal posture. And Jesus shows us what that posture looks like. Calm, but not passive. Strong, but not forceful. Present, but not anxious. Trusting, but not careless. This is the kind of life many people are searching for, even if they don't know how to describe it. A life where you are not constantly pulled in every direction. A life where your peace is not fragile. A life where external chaos does not automatically become internal chaos. And the truth is, that life is possible, but it requires a shift. A shift from control to trust, from rushing to stillness, from reacting to choosing, from fear to faith. And maybe right now, this is exactly what you needed to hear. Because you've been trying to handle everything on your own, trying to fix everything, trying to control everything, trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. And it's exhausting. But what if the answer is not to try harder, but to live differently? What if peace is not something you achieve, but something you allow? What if, instead of forcing your way through life, you learn to walk through it the way Jesus did? Slower, clearer, more grounded, more trusting. Because at the end of the day, the difference was never his circumstances. It was how he carried them. And that's the invitation. Not to escape stress completely, but to become someone who is no longer controlled by it. Someone who can walk through difficult moments without losing themselves. Someone who can face uncertainty without falling apart. Someone who can remain steady, even when life isn't. And if something in this message resonated with you, don't just let it pass. Sit with it. Reflect on it. Start applying even one small shift. Because transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, intentional steps. And those steps begin to shape a new way of living. A lighter way. A calmer way, a stronger way. And if you want more content like this, content that doesn't just inform you, but actually changes how you experience life, then stay connected to this channel. Because this is just the beginning. There is so much more to explore, and the next insight might be exactly what you need next.